We are back and it is time to kick off the 25-26 EFL Championship season as we return for our match week predictions and go through all 12 games taking place this weekend, giving you our preview, giving you our score prediction, and as always encouraging you to do exactly the same in the comments below. And you've got a better chance than ever this year because with Luton's relegation to League One and a dismal one at that, I'll now be watching about 40 less live championship games in the flesh this season, so you've got a very good chance to show me up. Will you be able to do so? Well, we'll find out in a minute, but very quickly, before we get started, a couple of quick things we've got to give a mention to. Firstly, we have had our EFL pre-season predictions for the Championship, League 1 and League 2. We've also done the National League as well. You can find all those videos in the playlist in the eye above, so you can get involved with season predictions too. Let us know in the comments of those videos where you think your team's going to finish and how you think the table will look come the end of the season. In addition to that, it's the final call for Fantasy EFL. You can play along every week and join our mini league to see how you get on against your fellow commenters and us, of course. Code for that league is THFP2526. You can find a link to it down in the description below. But now let's go and get back to match week 1 predictions. Of course, if you beat or match my overall score, you will get a recap as always this year. And we start on Friday night with two sides that were separated by 2 divisions last season, but perhaps a little bit of a false dawn on that front because it is Birmingham City versus Ipswich Town. Remarkably, 2 of the 4 favourites for promotion heading into the season. Birmingham came up from League One with a ridiculous points total and an awful lot of expenditure. And as we mentioned in the pre-season video, you can't accuse them of not going big again this year. Players like Kyogo and Damari Gray returning, adding so much quality to the attack, which was already bolstered with that big news of a 15 million transfer for Jay Stansfield last year. Chris Davis is there. He's starting to do the sort of job that Kieran McKenna did a few years ago, and he's almost being touted to do the same and achieve a double promotion, as Ipswich did in the last 2 seasons before reaching the Premier League. Or unfortunately for them, it was just a little bit too far. Of course, the big news in the summer is that they've lost Liam Delap. However, they've still got so many attacking players that were brilliant in their last full championship season. Schmodix at Blackburn, Philogene at Hull, Jack Clark at Sunderland. If they can recapture that form in an Ipswich shirt, with the likes of Ogbene to come back from injury as well, they have got a real chance to be up there too. Of course, pre-season predictions had Ipswich and Birmingham very high up the division. And this game, I think, is going to be pretty tight. The Friday night ones aren't normally the most entertaining. But to start off the season, I'm going to go for a tight game. But I am just going to go for the experience to do the job. I'm going to go for Ipswich to nick it by 2-1. They were actually fairly tight defensively when they went up from the Championship. For all of the talk about their home form and their expansive football, they were very low scoring, very robust on the road. But this game, I think, will be a little bit more thrilling. I'm going to go for 2-1 to the visitors. Let's move on to the first of 3 early kickoffs among 10 games on Saturday, the 9th of August. And we start with newly promoted Charlton Athletic at home to Watford, who of course have another new manager for the new season. An inexperienced one when it comes to English football, and a man who's got to deal with what was a slide in the second half of last season. Watford were in relegation form from the midway point onwards, and while they have added a few players to the squad, a few from further down the EFL as well, it is going to be a tough ask to get them back on track. Even at the end of last season, they went 5 without a win. They weren't scoring more than 1 a game. There was a lot wrong at Watford towards the end of last season, but they have still got some good players in that squad, and you would expect them to try and look for a quick start again. However, Charlton have come up with momentum, and despite being the bookmakers' 3rd favourites for relegation at the time of recording on Wednesday morning, I don't think they're going to be near it. Of course, I am slightly biased in that Nathan Jones is in charge, did a great job at Luton, has done a great job at Charlton as well. They've brought in half of the Luton defence and some of the best defenders as well. Kaminski in goal, Burke and Bell at the back. But the signing that really caught my eye in the last week was Charlie Kelman. QPR obviously struggled for goals last year, while Kelman was banging them in out on loan at Orient, who Charlton beat in that playoff final. And if he can get the service this year, which Charlton have got the capability to provide, I think he could prove to be an inspired signing in the long term. So for me, I think Charlton come up with a very solid squad. They come up with a bang. Yes, it's going to take a little while for some of them to gel, but what he's done, Nathan Jones, is added championship experience and EFL experience throughout. So I think Charlton might nick a win in this one. Watford's finished the season awfully. It's going to be a little bit of an uncertain time for them. I'm going to go for Charlton to win this one narrowly by 2-1 because let's be fair, it's going to be absolutely rocking down there on their championship return. The second early kickoff sees one of last year's playoff semi-finalists face the side who avoided relegation on goal difference. It is Coventry City versus Hull City. Been a very strange summer actually for Hull because they've not been able to do a lot of transfer work early because of the fact there's been some reported issues off the pitch. But they are starting to get things done in the last week or two, mainly since our prediction where we put them to struggle yet again. For Coventry, it's a relatively settled side. It's about keeping people fit. And can they finally avoid a slow start? Every year under Mark Robins, it was the traditional route. Coventry would start slow and then fly up the division. Happened last year after Frank Lampard took over as well. And it's just whether they can maintain that consistency. They're focused improving and going more aggressive in the fullback areas this year. Whether they'll all start and go straight away, I don't know. But after that late heartbreak in the playoffs, yet again for Coventry, I think it's important they start quickly here. Hull City were uninspiring for most of the end of last season, but they did okay in pre-season. They're looking decent now and they're starting to add some good players. I think it'll probably take a few weeks before we see the best of them now. So I'm going to go for Coventry City to win this one. They're normally very good at home as well. I'm going to go by 2-0 for the home side in the second early kickoff. And the final one of the 12:30s is the TV game, isn't it? Of course, it was going to be the main pick. It is Southampton versus Wrexham. Another two sides that were two divisions apart last year. Wrexham go back to back to back. I think the fourth one might be a big ask at this point. Southampton looking to recover from a dismal season with a new manager in the dugout in Will Still. Again, no English League experience. However, they've got a very decent team. Defensively, they've lost a couple from last year. Obviously, Ramsdale's gone out, Bednarek, Walker-Peters, etc. But going forward, they've still got a very good side. They've got a genuine goal threat and ruthless streak in the likes of Archer, Armstrong, who have scored goals at this level before. Downs, the new signing, also looks a pretty good goal threat too. They have got a couple of injuries in the midfield areas, which is making it a bit harder to create perhaps. But even against Brighton last week, they came back pretty well in a pre-season friendly. They are looking strong under Will Still, and he came in very early in the summer. He's had the whole pre-season to work with them. They've got a fairly settled squad. It's just a couple of injuries that might be a problem in there. For Wrexham, I think we're going to see similar to previous years. There's going to be a lot of big name signings coming late in the window. Even since we did our pre-season predictions, Connor Cody, Kiefer Moore among those to come in. So I think, again, once we get to sort of October time, we might see Wrexham improve and fly up the league. They've done so well to get up to the Championship. They finished last season brilliantly when they were starting to come under pressure for that second spot. And with Southampton coming down with no momentum, it's a tough one to call, but I do think that Southampton will start this season well. It's not going to define Wrexham's season this. They'll be absolutely fine in my opinion. But I'm going to go for Southampton to win the opening game of the year. They look strong, so I'm going to go by 3-1. Let's move on to the 3 p.m. kickoffs and two men that I know well as a Luton fan. It is Middlesbrough versus Swansea City, Rob Edwards versus Alan Sheehan. Two clubs that had very differing finishes to last season as Middlesbrough faded away and then let Michael Carrick go at the end of the season, whereas Swansea finally gave Alan Sheehan the job after a remarkable spell in interim charge where he actually got them up into the top half from what was looking in a threat of dragged into a relegation zone. An incredible effort to do so well. Picked up a lot of wins, a lot of narrow victories too. Maybe not improved the squad quite as much as I expected yet this summer. For Borough, it's got to be redemption for Rob Edwards, but I've got the same concern, which is in front of goal. They have added a couple of good players since we did our pre-season predictions. Alfie Jones just made it, and then Callum Britton's coming from Blackburn. But it is going to be a tough ask for them this year. They've still not replaced the goals of Latilaf from January. The Iheanacho loan experiment didn't work last season. So they're going to need the likes of Tommy Conway to step up. They need to hold on to the likes of Azaz and Hackney, which is a miracle that they're all still here at the moment. If they can do that, I think they will suit Rob Edwards' style of play. I just think this is going to be a little bit of a slow burner because Swansea are going to sit in deep. They did it quite a few times on the road at the top sides last year. Think back to that Sunderland game near the end of the season. They sat deep, they tried to soak up pressure, and Rob Edwards' teams, they play high, they like to be in possession. might get caught on the counter. I actually think these two will cancel each other out. And I'm going to go, unfortunately, my first 0-0 draw of the season, because as we saw in League 1 and 2 last week, it's not always tons of goals in the first match week of the year. As we reach the halfway point with a very tough game to call at Carrow Road, it is Norwich City versus Millwall. We mentioned the visitors had a brilliant finish to last season under Alex Neil, who did such a good job after he came in and almost got them within a sniff of the playoff places, which is an incredible effort, building on the solid squad that Neil Harris had put together. I really like what Alex Neil has done this summer, and they've still got Ivanovic for now, which, as I mentioned in the pre-season show, he is one of the most exciting young players in the Championship, and if they can keep hold of him, they've got a chance. They've brought in boyhood Millwall fan Alfie Doughty, who was crucial to Luton's promotion from this level a few years ago. They've generally got a very good defensive record. It's just about adding a few more goals, and with Coburn a year older and now they're permanently, perhaps we'll see more from him as well. I just think Millwall look incredibly good at the minute, and under Alex Neil, who's been there and done it before, I wouldn't back against them to be in a playoff race this year. For Norwich, very hard to call where they're going to go. Obviously, one of the few clubs to opt for an experienced Championship manager in Liam Manning this summer, where so many other clubs have gone elsewhere. But it has been difficult with Borja Sainz moving on, obviously the top scorer last year. Josh Sargent looks like he may well be leaving at the moment. Still at the club, still an important talisman for them. They've got a number of new signings coming in from across Europe who, as the season goes on, I'm sure will become important parts of the plan. But as it stands at the start of this season, Norwich City have not got the same firepower they had last year, and it's going to take time for new players to settle in. So I think this may be a slower, more frustrating start to the year. Maybe a bit of a flip reversal of what we saw last year where they drifted a little. And I'm going to go for Norwich City to lose the opener at Carrow Road, despite their usual good home record. I'm going to go for Millwall to nick a famous 1-0, which won't be the first or last time in these Championship predictions. Let's move into the second half and a battle of two of the bookies' favourites for relegation. It is Oxford United versus Portsmouth. Two sides that came up last year and did incredibly well. Both actually finished the season in pretty good form too. But both of them have perhaps had quieter summer transfer windows than we expected. Pompey had a lot of injuries in defensive areas last season, and I know I got a lot of criticism for saying they'd be in a relegation battle again this year, but there is the fact that you've got to have squad depth because there are going to be injuries. Every club's going to have these problems at Championship level, and Portsmouth are going to need to add depth to the squad, which I'm sure they will do before the end of this month. It is a team with a great coach. Of course, Colby Bishop missed a lot of the start of last season with injury, and the goals started to flow after he came back. So now he's in the squad. I think that's going to make a difference from August. But Oxford United have got the one ingredient that most other clubs haven't, which is one of the most experienced Championship managers in Gary Rowett. He dragged them away last year. I was a bit worried in the pre-season prediction show that they hadn't done much, but they have added a couple of players since. Lancashire on loan from Spurs could be a very interesting signing if he hits form, if he can get firing, and if he gets the right service. But overall, I think both of these sides are going to be defined by their home form this year. Can Oxford win the games like this against sides they expect to be in and around them? They did that pretty well for the most part last year. And can Portsmouth improve on what was the worst away record in the league last year? 50 goals conceded on the road, and try and find a little bit of solidity. I'm not sure going into the opening game, which is why I'm going to sit on the fence. We had to have one in the opening weekend, didn't we? I'm going to throw in the Championship's favourite scoreline, 1-1 between Oxford and Pompey, a result that probably helps neither. Well, another new manager in the dugout as we move on to the next one. In London, we see Queen's Park Rangers face Preston North End. Two sides that again are predicted to struggle a little bit this year. Preston have changed a lot of players in the squad, but you wouldn't say they've gone for the big, inspiring signings that you think are going to throw them up the division. However, they have added a number of solid pros, a number of players with Championship experience, and again, some that should hopefully just get them over the line and build a solid base, because they drifted massively towards the end of last season, and in the end, were a little bit fortunate having not won any of their last 5 of the season. For QPR, obviously in comes Stefan, replacing Marty Cifuentes, who's gone off to Leicester. We'll mention a bit later on. I really like Stefan as a coach. I think he's an excellent one. I think he's going to do a good job at QPR. However, they need to find goal scorers because it was the problem that Marty Cifuentes had last year. There were a lot of games where they were on top, just couldn't take their chances. I really thought Charlie Kelman would come back and get a big opportunity, but it doesn't appear to be the case. There are some talented young players there. Are they ready to go in and score 15, 20 championship goals yet? I'm not so sure. I think they've got a solid base. Again, I think they'll be fine under a very good coach, but I think it's going to be a frustrating season for both. Maybe a little bit of inconsistency in front of goal. I'm going to go for QPR based on home advantage here. I don't think it'll be a great game. I don't think it'll be a high scoring game. We're going to go for QPR by 1-0. Into the final third, and we move on to two more sides that were in danger last season. It is Stoke City versus Derby County. Mark Robins and John Eustace looking to build on their finish to last season where they got their sides away from trouble. Stoke had had a pretty rotten finish against some of the big boys in the league, and ironically, this was actually the last game of last season where they both played out a pretty dismal 0-0 draw. So hopefully we won't see the same standard again in this one. Derby have signed a lot of attacking players, a lot of experience. Eustace has also bought a couple from Blackburn with him. However, there are a couple of injuries and it might be a slower start, but I just think John Eustace will keep a team safe. He always does. He's solid. He finds a way. However, it's normally based on home form, as it was at Blackburn and Birmingham. On the road, his teams do tend to struggle to pick up wins. For Stoke, they did pick up some big home wins towards the end of last year. They've added a few good players, but maybe not been quite as active as I expected, maybe not improved to the extent yet. Will Mark Robins get the time? We saw Schumacher sacked ridiculously after 5 games last season. He had a 40% win rate and still lost his job. What's going to happen with Stoke this year? Are they finally going to find some stability? Are they finally going to find a regular goal threat? We'll find out the answer as the season goes on. But I think Derby will come to stifle Stoke. I think it will be a pretty low quality game again. Instead of the 0-0 we saw in the final game last time, I'm going to go one higher. Championship's favourite scoreline of 1 goal apiece. The final 3 p.m. kickoff on Saturday is West Bromwich Albion versus Blackburn Rovers. Two sides that just missed out on those playoff places last year. Of course, West Brom relegated Luton on the final day of last season and have then had a relatively uninspiring window. However, the big gamble with West Brom is Ryan Mason. They've gone for a coach not just with no English experience or no EFL experience. He hasn't got any experience as a permanent head coach. A few games in interim charge of Spurs, very different to being the named number 1. We know he's going to make mistakes during the season. Any novice would. But are they going to be costly for West Brom? And are they going to be strong enough to sneak in? Because as we mentioned, it's a very open race for the playoffs this year. There's maybe not those strong standout teams that we've seen in previous seasons below the top 2 or 3. So maybe that gives West Brom a chance to sneak in. For Valerian Ismail at Blackburn, bit of an interesting one, some experience moving on. But actually, after all the protests and the complaints about his slow start in charge, they finished the season fantastically last year. 4 wins and then a draw at Sheffield United. They looked really solid on the road as well. And maybe just signs that Blackburn are going to be all right. They never really improve or invest enough to make you think they're going to be in promotion contention. But I do think they're going to be solid enough this season. I've seen a lot of people tipping them to be in a relegation mix, which, unless they do something silly off the pitch again, I don't think will be the case. As it is, though, I think at home, West Brom might just have the advantage for this one. I'm going to go for West Brom to nick this by 2-1, but I wouldn't be surprised at any score in this one. Probably one of the hardest to call from the opening weekend of the season. And the final Saturday game is the late kickoff between Sheffield United and Bristol City. Of course, these sides faced off in the playoff semi-finals last year and it was very one-sided. However, neither of them have the same head coach or manager now. Sheffield United, not following the model of Leeds, who lost the playoff final after getting 90 points, kept the manager and won the title. They have opted to get rid of Chris Wilder, bring in their own man, the new ownership. And that man is Ruben Selles, who only just kept Hull up last year. It's a very interesting one. And we mentioned it in the manager special earlier this summer. Ruben Selles didn't really have a chance to manage a club with expectation or who are expected to be in a promotion race. He's been firefighting at Reading. He had an impossible situation at Southampton and he was trying to fight for survival with Hull. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he adapts to this situation. Perhaps a worry more so for Sheffield United is that they're starting to lose the spine of their team. Vinicius Souza moved on from midfield. Hodzic has now gone in defence since our prediction show as well. Kiefer Moore, a squad option up front, has moved on. Always a good player to have on the bench at this level. And if there's talk about Gus Harmer as well, that would really worry me. I think it's so crucial they keep hold of him. For Bristol City, weirdly a bit of a mixed reaction to Liam Manning being sacked, despite the fact that he made them consistent and sacrificed his style of football to achieve. Gerhard Struber has now come in, and while he's got a good managerial record and did an excellent job for a while with Barnsley in the Championship a few years back, he's talking about playing this style of football, which I just don't know if Bristol City have got the players to do. And I do worry that it's going to make them a bit more inconsistent again. So I think they might drift towards mid-table this year unless they can bring in some good signings and hit the ground running. I'm not convinced by Sheffield United, and I did make this prediction before Armor Hodzic has left as well. I think it's going to be a slightly less convincing season. I don't think they'll be battling for the top two, but I do still think they'll be right in that mix for the top six again. I think they'll win this game too. I think Bristol City might start slowly. I'm going to go for Sheffield United by 2-0 at Bramall Lane. And the final game on Sunday is the talk of the town. Leicester City versus Sheffield Wednesday. We'll get to Leicester in a minute, but two clubs off the pitch that have got a lot to worry about for very different reasons. For Leicester, it's the looming points deduction, the looming charges and whatever else. But Sheffield Wednesday is the club we have to talk about. What a mess they're in. We didn't really know if they were going to be able to fulfill this fixture or not. It does look like they now will do so. But players travelling of their own accord, not being paid, staff not being paid, 14 or 15 senior players remaining at the club and more leaving as time goes on. All of them have the right to now, having not been paid for 2 months. They are boosted by the fact that Barry Bannon has signed a new short-term deal to keep himself there. And that's a good show of loyalty for someone who, to be honest, could have probably walked away in this situation. We had the chaos with the managerial situation. We discussed Sheffield Wednesday in depth last week. I'll put that link up there. I don't want to go over all the same ground again, but it is a mess. And look, Henrik Pedersen can't really fail in terms of results, but for Leicester to not win this game would be a miracle because Sheffield Wednesday, they're 2 or 3 injuries away from putting out youth players, and their bench is going to be full of youth team players. They've got a squad that were cancelling friendlies because they weren't able to play. They've been training, but to what extent can you? Because in between the games, you've also got to wrap these players in cotton wool now. And I think away from home is going to be very tough. We saw they struggled early on the road last season. They lost 4-0 at Sunderland, and that was after a 4-0 win at home when they were looking good with a big, strong squad. I think this is going to be a really tough start for them. Leicester City, obviously without the goal threat they had last time they came down. They had Dewsbury Hall creating. They had Vardy scoring. They had Iheanacho involved in the squad as well. Now they're going to be reliant on the experience of Jordan Ayew, who I think will get enough goals for them in the short term. I think in defence and midfield, they're still rock solid, albeit a few injuries in the fullback areas hasn't helped them in recent weeks. I think Leicester City are going to be very strong. So I think I have to go for a wholly convincing win. And I just think Sheffield Wednesday will run out of steam. It's a sad situation. We've talked about it in depth in the last couple of weeks. So sorry, Wednesday fans. I'm between 4 and 5-0 for Leicester. I think I might go for 5 because if they're letting a couple Sheffield Wednesday, I can see the hedge dropping. I think it's going to be crucial that they try and compete at home in the first few weeks. So with that out the way, let's have a quick recap of what we've gone for in the opening weekend of the Championship season. Not many away wins. In fact, just 2 I've gone for. Ipswich on the opening night, narrowly at Birmingham, and Millwall to get a famous 1-0 away at Norwich City. I've gone for a couple of big home wins with Southampton score 3 against Wrexham, who I think will improve once the big new signings settle in. And I've also gone for Leicester City to win by 5 against Sheffield Wednesday because of the sorry plight they're in. However, that does mean I've gone for all 3 relegated sides to win, and I've also gone for Charlton to win on their Championship return. But do you agree with me? That's the important question. Let us know your score predictions in the comments below. Give us your thoughts on the weekend's action and your team ahead of the Championship season. Don't forget to check out the pre-season prediction show where we covered the promotion, playoff and relegation places. And of course, if your team has had a managerial change this summer, you'll be able to find a playlist with all the manager specials up in the eye above. Please do check those out and our predictions for the other leagues. Craig and Charlie will be continuing their League One shorts both here and on TikTok. And there'll be plenty of matchday action as there was last weekend from across the EFL grounds we visit this year. Thank you very much for being here as always. Get involved down in the comments below. And I'll see you again this time next week as we return for Match Week 2.